Ted and I first heard this beautiful sermon when we were visiting a UU church in Golden, Colorado last summer. And we asked Kierstin Homblette, the author, if we could edit it slightly for South Carolina and present it to you. Kierstin said yes, and I want to tell you just a little bit about her because it's such an honor to know her. She is the beloved community coordinator for the UU congregations of the Boulder-Denver cluster on the Front Range of Colorado. And she helps congregations deepen their understanding of justice making as a spiritual practice and coordinate their justice efforts, including economic justice and immigration. And along with this cluster congregation, she is working to raise funds for another year of this collaborate justice ministry, which is so unique. She was raised UU in Florida, graduated from the Union Theological Seminary in New York, is a classmate of Eve Stevens, or was at any rate, and she's looking forward to ordination. Thank you, Kierstin. So in the spirit of the song that she sang so beautifully, would you please close your eyes and plant your feet firmly on the earth? Take a deep breath and imagine Route 123 in Clemson after a football game. I know, not really pleasant. But stay with me for a moment. Imagine all these cars filled with people heading home after the game, slowly crawling down the highway, inching along, a mass of humanity. And now imagine all those people disappearing at once, like that. Sweet? No, not exactly. Because the cars aren't going to go anywhere, and the road's still going to be jammed. But everyone, including you, is gone. No children on playgrounds, nobody in the grocery store, nobody anywhere. What if every person spontaneously disappeared from Earth? Not because of disease or natural disaster or nuclear war. What if we just disappeared? You can open your eyes. This scenario has been imagined before, especially by religious people. There is, in fact, an entire study called eschatology, devoted to such ideas. In seminary, eschatology is a word that people really like to throw around, mostly because it sounds impressive, but it's very seminary. But also, it is a deeply religious question. How will you imagine, do you imagine that this world will end? It can simultaneously evoke both fear and hope. And it says something about our worldview, our concept of the divine, and asks questions about the level of control we humans really have over our lives and our world. Eschatology is concerned with what are believed to be the final events of history, the ultimate destiny of humanity, sometimes called end of the world or the world to come. In many religions, it is taught as an existing future event prophesied in sacred texts and lore. And I think we could safely say it's a subject of fascination by us, right here. Whether we subscribe to a particular religious end-time view, or whether we're just interested. Because think of the books and movies like War of the Worlds, which I fell asleep watching last night, is still around. And then remember the Mayan prophecy of 2012, and we're still here? I think most of us took that as kind of a joke. But there's a reason that it keeps coming up. The end times are upon us, says the preacher on the corner, as UUs walk by, shake your head, keep walking. And perhaps in the back of your mind, though, you wonder, I wonder. And really, why would we not wonder? Raging fires, epic floods, massive hurricanes. It doesn't feel unreasonable sometimes. Eschatologies vary to their degree of optimism and pessimism about the future. It can be utopian or dystopic, such as heaven, hell. Modern eschatology, both religious and secular, involves the violent disruption and destruction of the world, But some Christian and Jewish eschatologies view the end times as the consummation or the perfection of God's creation, a time for joy and celebration. Have a drink. However, for the purposes of our discussion today, it matters not what has happened to us out there on 123 in the rush to get out of the game and all the other fellow human beings who have disappeared. It can be the second coming of Jesus. It could be their vaporization by aliens. It could be our day of judgment. It could be spontaneous combustion. You decide why it happened. But our focus this morning is not on our final destiny as human beings, but instead, what would happen to the world without us? Without the presence of our species, what would change? What would remain? How long would it take for it to look like we never existed? Or is our mark on this planet Earth indelible? What would it mean to live in a way that acknowledges our intimate relationship with this planet that is our home? There is a book by Alan Weissman called The World Without Us. I don't know if anybody has read it, but a lot of students that are in environmental studies are reading it now too. Weissman asked, how would the rest of nature respond if it were suddenly relieved of the relentless pressures we heap on it and our fellow organisms? How soon would or could the climate return to where it was before we fired up our engines? How long would it take to recover lost ground and restore Eden the way it must have gleamed and smelled before Adam arrived? Could nature ever obliterate all of our traces? As it turns out, the answer is yes and no. And in the process of answering his own question, Weissman discovers truths that are, for all of us, simultaneously disturbing and comforting. So here's his first truth. We are transient beings. Our presence here on Earth, both as individuals and as species, is fleeting. Our relative role in the great drama that is life is brief and ephemeral. Our ultimate and lasting impact, the greatest accomplishments of humanity, are for the most part temporary. This is a hard truth for us to stare in the face. All that we have built, all that we have achieved materially, all our structures and systems, thousands of years of modifying our environment and other species to suit our needs, our engineering marvels, and our comforts of modern life, they're no match for the power and resiliency of the natural world. According to Weissman, after our disappearance from rush hour traffic or after a football game, wherever we are, boom, the process of our erasure begins immediately. 2 days after humans disappear, without pumping, the New York City subways would impassably flood. 7 days after humans disappear, the emergency fuel supply to diesel generators that circulate cooling water in nuclear reactor cores would run out. 1 year after humans disappear, animals would begin to return to sites of those nuclear reactors, which would have all melted down and burned. 3 years after humans disappear, with no heat, pipes would burst all over town. Buildings would groan as their innards expand and contract. Joints between walls and roof lines would separate, and skyscrapers would lean and fall. 20 years after humans disappear, the Panama Canal would have closed, reuniting the Americas, and common garden vegetables that we eat would have been reverted to the unpalatable wild strains. 100 years after humans disappear, populations of small predators like raccoons and weasels and foxes would diminish due to competition from our household feral cats. 300 years after humans disappear, bridges would fall. Dams would have silted worldwide, overflowed, toppled. Cities such as Houston, built in river deltas, would wash away. 500 years after humans disappear, a forest would stand in the place of most suburbs. Amid the trees, half concealed by a spreading understory, would lie aluminum dishwasher parts and stainless steel cookware with their plastic hands splitting but still intact. The resiliency of life is awesome in the biggest sense of the word. In a mere 500 years, the work of generations of human return to the forest. Cities fall, animals return, the world without us moves on. Although this can be a bit depressing, I find that it can also be comforting. I actually find a sense of comfort in the power of the earth to regenerate itself, to heal, to recover, and recover relatively quickly from the muddle we have made of it. And yet, there is a second truth that Weissman speaks to us about, and that is that we are permanent. In some very important ways, what we do, who we are, our energy and legacy live on forever. We make a mark as individuals, as a nation, as a species in the book of life. The choices we make, the things we value, the things we throw away, live on into perpetuity. Not only through our children and our culture, but even if we were to disappear today, our presence on earth will remain forever. Perhaps this is the most hopeful truth that we face. Maybe this is the answer we want to hear. It matters that we have lived, and it matters what we do with our lives. Maybe some of our accomplishments and the beautiful things we create as individuals and species will remain for a long time, even after our physical bodies are gone. But it is not always an easier truth for our earth home to face. The longevity of some of our human creations is quite sobering. Thousands of years after humans disappear, intact human structures, those built deep underground like the English Channel, would remain. 35,000 years after humans disappear, lead deposited during the smokestack era would finally be cleansed from the soil. 100,000 years after humans disappear, CO2 may be back to pre-human levels, although that's becoming increasingly doubtful. 250,000 years after humans disappear, the level of plutoniums in bombs would finally be lost to the Earth's natural background radiation. Hundreds of thousands of years after humans disappear, microbes could possibly evolve to biodegrade our plastic. 7 million years after humans disappear, vestiges of Mount Rushmore's likenesses would remain. Can you imagine in 7 billion years somebody looking up and say, who are those guys? On the other hand, toxic man-made chemical compounds like the PCBs that are in Leichhardt and dioxins would likely to still be intact, although they may more likely to be buried. 10 million years after humans disappear, bronze sculptures would still be recognizable, and the thinker would still be sitting there contemplating. 4.5 billion years after humans disappear, the 500,000 tons of depleted uranium-328 in the U.S. alone would finally reach its half-life. For at least another billion years, microbial life resembling the first life on Earth would outlast every other life form, which we were talking about earlier in the seed, everything seed. Here's something that would last forever, though. Our radio and television broadcasts would still be traveling outward and outward into the universe forever. And so now we can't help but think that I Love Lucy and The Cosby Show and Snooki will outlast everything. But I guess uranium-328 is probably pretty close to the most immortal thing, and also microbes. Think of all the time and money we spend trying to eradicate both of those. In the end, they outlive us. And let's not even get started on plastic. A takeout container with your salad from the local restaurant or that grocery store bag you pick up every week is potentially a choice that will echo thousands of lifetimes into the future. Our ability to impact life on our planet into perpetuity already exists. We are making choices every day with consequences that are just about as permanent as you can get. In the end, there is both the disturbing and comforting feelings in this truth. Our lives and our choices are of consequence, and we are making choices to live in ways that will affect our planet for 5 billion years into the future after we are gone. What do we do with the truth of being both transient and permanent beings? The Reverend Forrest Church famously defined religion as our human response to the dual reality of being alive and having to die. These two truths are similar. So what is our human response to the transient and the permanent? How does the dual reality of being fleeting and deeply impactful call us to live? There are several possibilities. We can take the short-sighted option. We can choose as our dominant narrative our inherent transience. We can tell ourselves that what we do and how we live doesn't matter that much, as the earth will simply reclaim us and keep turning. Concrete jungles and deforestation and oil spills, they're no match for Mother Nature. We might as well live it up while we're here because we won't last long. Or we can take the eternal view. We can choose as our dominant narrative our inherent permanence, that our human species is in control of our planet and we can shape it to our will permanently, that we are the stewards of the environment, the species tasked with its care and maintenance, that we can determine how the earth will look and what it will produce and what impact our life will have upon it. Both of these narratives are alive and well in the world today. They are embodied in our politics, in our environmental movements, in big business, and in organizations, including religious organizations. In the way that we choose to ignore the impact our choices are having on our weather, on our health, on our fellow human beings, and on other life forms with whom we share this planet, all of these result from the choices we make. We can choose to ignore it because we are really not in control, and we have never been. Or we can take action. Both of these narratives ignore the third truth, though, emerges from Weissman's book, and that is enshrined in the seventh UU principle. In both our transience and our permanence, we are part of the interdependent web of life. As humans, we are neither inconsequential nor are we the pinnacle of evolution. We are simply one part of the wheel of life, inextricably connected to all the other parts that have ever existed and ever will exist. Our existence matters. And yet, as Weissman puts it, without us, earth will abide and endure. But without her, we cannot even be. Put another way by Chief Seattle, this is my favorite. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. All things are connected, like the blood that unites us all. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely strands in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. What does your ultimate connection to our home earth ask of you, of our nation, of our corporations? How does it call us to live, to make choices, to ask more of our politicians, to move through our world? Does knowing that your whole neighborhood will return to a forest, but in a moment, while the plastic beads in your exfoliating facial scrub will likely be around for hundreds of thousands of years, change you in any way? Does knowing that half the people in America still believe that climate change is a hoax energize you or paralyze you? Imagining the world without us is certainly an interesting experiment, but it is also a reality check. By restoring our sense of awe of the earth and our connectedness to it, we can move beyond political and intellectual arguments about environmentalism. We can understand that by our existence, we are changing Earth and we are being changed by it. We can see more clearly our place in the everything seen and in the constant unfolding of life around us. You and I, we are transient beings, but together, the big we in this room, we are permanent. May we live our lives in ways that we recognize the beauty and the challenge of this dual existence. And may we live our lives together in this fellowship and in this nation in a way that values what is sacred, both transient and permanent. May it be so.